attended segregated schools, graduated from Camden Academy High School in Alabama. From there, I matriculated at Talladega College in Alabama, graduating with a degree in history, BA degree in history in 1971. And in the fall of 1971, I became a student at Crozer Theological Seminary in Rochester, New York. It had recently moved there from Chester, Pennsylvania. And I received the MA and the MDiv degree at Crozer Seminary and the PhD degree from Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. And since that time, 1980, I received the PhD degree. I've been writing, studying, doing research on the life of Martin Luther King Jr. And up to this point, I've authored 6 books on King, edited 2, co-edited 2, and co-authored 2 for a total of 12 books. So I've devoted much of my academic life, not only to teaching, but to writing about Dr. King.
Now, the book that you have now, Dr. Baldwin, deals with Dr. Martin Luther King from a different perspective entirely. Why don't you make some statements about that book, and then we'll come back and we'll allow you to elaborate on it after this first segment.
I wrote the book because we, I think, have lost a sense of the ordinary person, the human being that was Martin Luther King Jr. Every year, third Monday in January, we celebrate his birthday. But I think the ordinary person that was king, the human being that was king, has gotten lost in our annual national celebrations. And I wrote the book to sort of reclaim that ordinary, and Dr. King was an ordinary person on many levels. He was a human being. I understand the need to create superheroes. We live in a capitalistic society. And so we've created this larger-than-life figure, this iconic hero, this messianic figure, this superhuman personality. But Dr. King was an ordinary human being. And the book is really about reclaiming the ordinary person, the ordinary human being that was Martin Luther King Jr.
You know, I think that even the idea, Dr. Baldwin, is an inspiration to us all to understand that we don't always start, you didn't always start out as Dr. Lewis Baldwin. There was somebody that was Lewis Baldwin long before you matriculated in all of those institutions that you've attended. Yeah. And so that's the same thing we're saying about Dr. Martin Luther King, I would imagine.
That's right.
He was not always delivering that speech, I have a dream, and etc. There was something about him before he got to that stage of being able to do that. And this is what you were saying that this book reveals.
This book reveals the very human side. We have this image of the man who made great speeches before thousands of people, who led large demonstrations, civil rights campaigns. But what about the man on his knees praying to God, asking for strength and asking for a deliverance? That is the human Martin Luther King Jr.
And so, Dr. Baldwin, what we'll do, we're going to take this first commercial break, and then the second segment of 8 minutes will allow you to devote that time to talking about the book and the human Martin Luther King. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Yeah, you know, things that
eating habits, his love for music, all that.
That's right. That's the Martin Luther King that we like to see.
That people don't know.
To know that he was just like everybody else.
Exactly. And that we can all, you know,
relate to the fact of death and know that even though we might be ordinary,
we can strive to the same standards of excellence.
That's right.
That he strove for.
That's right. Yeah, well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
He was not always Dr. Martin Luther King having a dream. Yeah, he was a young boy.
Martin Luther King Jr., the ordinary boy, the ordinary man.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's an inspiration to us all, though. That says something.
I've always told my students that. I've always approached it from that angle, you know.
So you can be anything you want to be.
That's right.
That's right. That's right.
Strive toward excellence.
That's right.
Yeah.
1 minute out.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate this information.
Thank you, thank you.
We have to get this on tape, you see.
Thank you.
Do something in reference to this.
30 seconds.
Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Baldwin, and he's given us some information in reference to a new book dealing with Dr. Martin Luther King. In an attempt, Dr. Baldwin, I think we've demonstrated this book on a number of occasions on this particular show, but in an attempt to sort of get into Dr. Martin Luther King behind the veil, behind the public veil. Let's start off where you wish to start.
Yes, I've tried to look at the Martin Luther King Jr., the personal qualities of Dr. King that endeared him to common, ordinary people that he met daily. He met a lot of common, ordinary people on the streets, but what were those qualities that endeared him to those people? One, of course, had to do with his love for soul food, his eating habits. He had this robust appetite for soul food, and he would eat with his hands. And you know that kind of quality endears one to the very common people. He always ate with his hand, most of cases. He loved the ribs, spare ribs. He loved chicken, fried chicken. He loved pig's feet. He loves collard greens and cornbread. So he was able to relate to people at the lower levels of the social economic ladder because of his eating habits.
Soul food.
Yes, soul food. And also his love for music. He had a great love for the Negro spirituals, for gospel music, also for rhythm and blues, Sam and Dave, the music of Aretha Franklin. So he was able to embrace different kinds of music. He was able to had a great appreciation for dance. He was very playful. He teased people a lot, and he used to tell a lot of jokes, and had this tremendous gift of folk wit, humor, and laughter. He loved to tell jokes about Negro preachers. He loved to tell jokes about the Negro church and jokes about the movement. So he was a very fun-loving person, and he found the energy, the inner resources to celebrate and enjoy life despite the fact that he was receiving sometimes 40 telephone calls a day threatening his life. He was jailed some 20 to 25 times. His family was threatened. He was the victim of verbal abuse, racial epithets, but he still found time to enjoy life, to celebrate life through his eating habits, through his love for music and dance, through his tendencies to be playful, to tease people, and also through his gift of folk wit and humor and laughter. Dr. King, according to Ralph Abernathy, had he not succeeded as a civil rights leader, he would have succeeded as a stand-up comic.
That's right. That's exactly it. Had not Barack Obama been the president of the United States, he would have succeeded as what? A stand-up comedian.
That's right.
That's exactly it.
So to say that Dr. King was in some ways the comedian of the civil rights movement is not to trivialize his role.
That's right.
He was a tremendous leader, but he was able to inject humor and wit and laughter into the movement, and even in the most difficult situations, because for an example, before they moved into Birmingham in 1963, Dr. King preached a mock eulogy for Ralph Abernathy and others who were involved. Said, look, we're going into Birmingham. Some of us might not make it. This is what I'm going to say over your dead body. And it created a lot of laughter and that kind of thing. And it eased a lot of the tension and the anxiety that came with these demonstrations. So Yeah, he was able to inject humor, and it became very acceptable in the circles of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and in the larger context of the Civil Rights Movement.
Laughter does something. There's something that you can do with laughter and that you can't do any other way.
It has a healing effect,
correct.
and Dr. King understood that, a healing effect. So he turned to laughter and humor. We know that spirituality was important, you know, praying, that kind of thing, but laughter, humor, sustain them in the context, re-energize them in the context of the movement. And we have to look at laughter and humor if we're going to understand why Dr. King was such a resilient personality.
Yeah, he understood that.
Yeah,
he understood the importance of a good joke, a good statement that will bring about laughter at a special time has a healing quality and characteristic.
And in that sense, he was part of a culture, because as far back as the days of slavery, you find that African Americans were able to laugh at their condition. And James Weldon Johnson wrote about that in the 1930s, about the gift of laughter, humor in the black community, and how it was a compensating mechanism.
Right. Laugh instead of crying.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is. And sometimes you want to cry, but you might be too old to cry, and so you come up with something funny in reference to laughter.
Yes, it was a compensating mechanism.
Right.
It had a healing effect, and Dr. King was an heir of that. So he was able to bring humor and laughter into in the context of the movement.
That's right. And that's a good quality to be able to understand. You see, a lot of folks might not understand that, but sometimes humor can break things.
Exactly.
You know, you're all tied up and whatever, and somebody drop a good line. And especially a person of some authority or whatever, he might drop a word on you or something.
And what I've done in the book is to use Howard Kleinbell, who is one of the great psychologists of religion, and to use Lance Levine, who is a cultural historian. Kleinbell talks about the healing effects of laughter and humor. And Levine, of course, talks about laughter as a kind of compensating mechanism. So I've used these scholars to frame my thoughts about Dr. King and his use of humor and his you know, delight in laughter and wit in the context of the movement. So that's a side, I think, that has not been covered in the scholarship on Dr. King.
And I think that's a contribution. That's a big contribution in terms of who Dr. King was. You see, you've got his statue on the mall in Washington, D.C., and you know all these other things about this great man. But here was a man that could tell a joke, that understood a joke, and could have laughter among his friends and etc.
Yeah, we know the superhero, the larger-than-life personality, but we don't know the ordinary person or the human being.
And you're able to reveal this in this book.
That's right.
So what we're going to do, we're going to take this second commercial break, and then we'll come back with this final segment. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Sometimes you will laugh instead of crying.
That's right.
That's right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you know,
There's a lot of situations that you see, and I think I've said that on many occasions. Looking at the continent of Africa and hearing some of the weird things that folks are doing in terms of stealing money and whatever, then you laugh about it, but you want to, you know, you laugh instead of crying. The only other alternative you have is to cry over it.
That's part of the survival instinct, I think.
That's exactly it.
I think people,
that's exactly it. Our people went through that a long time. Yeah, if you can't laugh, if you were a slave and you didn't have the ability to laugh, the man looked at you because you might be ready to start a revolution or something.
Right.
And so you don't want
folk
you
wit and humor and laughter.
That's right. That's right.
Being able to laugh at your condition, I think, speaks to a level of maturity that very few human beings reach.
Or very few people understand. You see, the court jester is somebody. You know, the king needed him.
That's right.
That's right. He needed him. And I certainly appreciate this. This is some excellent information. I think this really throws a different perspective in terms of Dr. Martin Luther King. He's still the man that had a dream.
That's right.
You know, he worked his way up
It
there.
didn't undermine his sincerity.
Right. No, not at all.
Dream. Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. That's one of the great characteristics of being a leader, you know, humor.
That's
you know,
right.
if you're a leader, you can't laugh about things or have any kind of humor about things. Then you
can't be a quality leader.
Can't be a quality leader. So we've got this final 10 minutes. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. LBaldwin, and he's giving us some information in reference to a recently published book dealing with Dr. Martin Luther King called Behind the Public Veil, The Humanness of Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr. Baldwin, let's see if we can pick up where we left off, talking about those aspects of the book that you'd like for our audience to understand this morning.
Yes, well, I published the book in 2016. Actually, it came out May 1st, 2016. And it builds on Martin Luther King Jr. scholarship, because if you look at the trajectory or developing trends in King scholarship, you'll notice that it started out in 1959 with Lawrence Reddick. You know the name Lawrence Reddick, who published the book Crusader Without Violence, a biography of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1959. Now, Reddick's book initiated what we call the biography genre in King study. But since that time, we've gone through a lot of genres. We've gone through the Black studies genre in King studies, and I'm honored to have been a part of that with my book, There's a Balm in Gilead. Now we are going through the Christian ideals and ideal genre in King studies, the spirituality genre in King studies, and finally the globalization genre in King studies. So what we are talking about here is an effort to understand Dr. King and his achievements as a person, as a human being. And I see the book Behind the Public Veil as a part of this developing trend, because we want to reclaim the man. We don't want that to get lost, because, you know, if you hold these national holidays and you're always dealing with this mythical figure, this mythological...
Dr. Martin Luther King on the mall.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And what Behind the Public Veil is really a part of a developing trend in King scholarship, where we actually look at what King himself was about. Who was this man? What was he about? What was his vision? What was his dream? And I think this, as I said earlier, I think is getting lost in our national celebrations of his birthday.
You often wonder what really would be the status of the African American in America had Dr. Martin Luther King not been assassinated. I know that you can only make conjectures in reference to that. But,
that's right.
But he would have. I'm sure that he would have made a great contribution beyond where we are today.
That's right. He was so human. There are stories that I share in the book about him going to soul food restaurants in Atlanta. There was a restaurant called Beeman's Restaurant, which was located, I guess, about a couple of blocks from the SCLC headquarters on Auburn Avenue Northeast. Dr. King would walk from the SCLC headquarters to Beeman Restaurant. And it was about a couple of blocks away, but it would take him an hour to get there because he was
stopping along the way,
talking to winos,
yes, that's
winos,
right.
talking
exactly,
to homeless people,
that's
to
exactly
street people. He had such a human touch, and I think that more than anything else speaks to what he had to offer humanity.
Good.
It's not about all of the awards, all of the accolades. It's about the human touch. He was able to walk with kings and queens and also walk with the winos and the homeless. And when you have those kinds of qualities, I think it speaks to the contributions that one can make to the uplift and empowerment of humanity. He had so much to offer. And I think it's tragic that he was assassinated at age 39.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, in view of some of the things that you know about Dr. King, where do you think we stand today in reference to the political situation, and should we participate in the political arena, et cetera? I think we need to know more about that.
I think Dr. King would be very concerned about where we are on the political scale of things today. If you look at Donald Trump, if you look at what's happening with the Hillary Clinton campaign, Bernie Sanders, I think he would be very disturbed with the level of what I would call the unpresidential that's going on.
Nature of all of that.
The unpresidential nature of what's going on. Dr. King believed that one should exude a spirit of love, of acceptance, of virtue, of morality, even in the context of politics. And I think he would be disturbed with a lot of what's going on, but I think he would urge those who are concerned about the future of our nation, about the beloved community, bringing people together, irrespective of racial differences, class differences, religious differences. I think he would have a lot to say to us about that, is that we should keep our eyes on what the American dream means.
Okay, very
and
good.
it means bringing people together, not putting up walls, not setting up barriers, but creating bridges of understanding and goodwill and cooperation. I think he would have a very powerful message to deliver to us in this political season.
And he would certainly urge all of our people to participate, well, not our people, all people to participate in the political processes.
I think he would see it as a moment of urgency, because we don't want our nations to fall into the hands of the wrong leaders. Leaders that will divide us, leaders that will cause all kinds of tragedy and confusion and uncertainty for the future. I think he would be very concerned about that today.
Yeah, and so in a real sense, you think that by demonstrating Dr. Martin Luther King from that perspective, that it will be encouraging to a large number of other folks that might know.
I think the King legacy has a lot to teach us about how we might deal with what's going on today in political circles. I really think so. Dr. King always said that morality and ethics also apply to politics.
You know,
you
and
gotta
it has to.
Exactly. You got to have
because if you're going to lead folks, you ought to be some credibility in terms of where you're leading them.
Yeah, and then you got to exude those kinds of qualities of leadership, which has to do with ethics, which has to do with altruistic concerns. That is, being concerned about the welfare of all people, and coming up with policies that benefit the common good. I think this is what Dr. King was about, and I think we need to revisit. And I think this is what the book Behind the Public Veil is about. It's about revisiting the images of Dr. King. What was he about? What values did he put before us? How did he translate those values into practical action and practical reality and public policy? Exactly. And this is what we are about.
Very good. And I think we've got about a minute and a half, Dr. Baldwin, before we end this show for today. But I think that what you have in terms of this book, I think it can go a long way in terms of bringing more people into this whole discussion in reference to civil rights and whatever, and I think it leads the way in terms of pointing us to where we ought to go and where we can go.
Yes. I'm working with a group of Vanderbilt professors now on a new book on King called Revives My Soul Again. And the subtitle is The Spirituality of Martin Luther King Jr. What we are actually doing is building on the book that I've just written, Behind the Public Veil, to humanize King and to put him before the public as a human being who had a higher human and ethical ideal that he was striving for. And that if we read him carefully and learn from him, then we too will strive toward those human,
very good,
those high human and ethical ideals.
That no matter who you might be, you can always emulate something that's greater than who you are.
And we're all struggling for this greater idea.
Very good. And of course, let me thank you, Dr. Baldwin, over the last half minute that we have here for bringing by that information. And that's why we continue to call upon you. Because not only do you bring a book every time you come, but you bring so many ideas and so many things that we never thought of in terms of who Dr. Martin Luther King is and who he was. And I appreciate that. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.
Johnny Beasley talk about you a lot. You know Johnny?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.